Hello and welcome to this Serial Geek TV episode commentary for The Price of Freedom, an episode of She-Ra, Princess of Power, produced by Filmation Studios. My goodness, this episode, ever since I saw it as a kid, I knew it was something special, and of course, yes, I know exactly when I first saw this episode. And this will be one of those moments when you realise that even though we in the UK received the first episode of some of these 1980s cartoons before the US, it would take a goodly while for the rest of the series to be shown, especially as, over here, episodes of a series were only shown once a week on terrestrial channels. There was no such thing as syndication over here in the UK. And sometimes months would pass by without a new episode airing at all. So yeah, this episode aired on the 18th of August 1987. That's just under 2 years after it first aired in the US. And a few days before my 10th birthday. And I still remember sitting in front of the TV, watching this episode with the sunshine blazing through the net curtains, only to be overjoyed when I saw the story open on Eternia. Yes, I've mentioned before on this channel that as a kid I wasn't a big fan of She-Ra, but I loved the crossover episodes because it meant new He-Man related adventures. This episode is penned by the great Bob Ford, who for He-Man wrote The Rainbow Warrior, a beautiful episode that focuses on Queen Marlena, and The Problem with Power, the episode in which He-Man relinquishes his power, what I believe to be the best episode of the series. And then for She-Ra, to name a few, Bob Ford wrote She-Ra Unchained, For Want of a Horse, a very underrated episode showing the true cruel nature of Hordak, Unexpected Ally, the two-part Anchors Aloft, which I actually haven't watched in a long time but always enjoyed it, the wonderfully comical Flowers for Hordak, and for the second season he penned another contender for the best episode of the She-Ra series with Sweet Bee's Home. But for now, we are here with what I believe to be the best episode of the She-Ra series, The Price of Freedom. Now, I love the opening of this episode. Why, I hear you ask? It's just a simple scene of Prince Adam and Orko in the Wind Raider, but it's what this scene represents, and it shouldn't be lost on anyone. Bob Ford knows that Etheria's desperate situation with the Horde, pretty much controlling the planet, cannot be fully appreciated until we have witnessed another world that is flourishing. For this reason, here we are on Eternia. Now, She-Ra episodes have opened on Eternia before, but as we're about to see, never would the contrast of landscapes have such punch. Whilst it may be a little on the nose, the dialogue between Prince Adam and Orko in the Wind Raider shows that life for them isn't always about foiling villainous plots. They comment on what a beautiful day it is. They don't have a care in the world. As we see when the sorceress summons Adam, he immediately sends Orko back to the palace. This is a very wise decision because Orko, regardless of how he is written, will always visually represent a form of comic relief, and his presence in this very serious episode would have taken us out of certain impactful story moments. Now here we go, boom, look at this. A town is being bombed, lives are being threatened, and a dictator, the ruthless leader of the evil horde, Hordak, is terrorising his subjects. The atmosphere is completely different. This world is chaotic and dangerous. Bob Ford has led us from the peaceful, always beautiful planet of Eternia into the complete war zone that is Etheria. And few moments in the series are as striking as that long panning shot filled with bombings and destruction. The amount of work that goes into that scene is just wow. This is war at its worst, and the Horde is undoubtedly winning. Prince Adam and the viewer are left to just stare at the sight. The picture of annihilation is so dumbfounding that Adam can't even move when the bomb careens towards him.
Adam, welcome back to Etheria, my brother. You came at a good time.
She-Ra, what's going on?
War, Adam.
War Adam. Her voice, there's a sense of strength, conviction and sadness that the line literally rings in our ears. Maybe in the hands of another writer or voice actor, the dialogue would have undermined the situation or not been delivered to best suit the scene. But my goodness, Bob Ford's writing and Melindy Britt's delivery is just utter perfection. Now, you want to talk about the Princess of Power. This scene in which she first appears saves her brother and immediately rushes up to save as many people as she can. This is She-Ra. She is a kick-ass warrior woman and will do everything she can to fight the oppression of the evil Horde. In his storyboards, Don Manuel clearly feels the same way, stating that She-Ra should not be smiling during any of these scenes. And to quote the artist, "This woman is all business." I should state that much of the footage of the missiles, explosions, advancing armies of Horde troopers and the Horde troopers in action was going to be heavily recycled for the shelved Season 2 episode The Silaxian Wars, which was planned to depict the biggest war ever seen on the show between Huntara's people and the Horde. Sadly, it never came to pass. What we're seeing, this non-stop battle, this is the reality of Etheria we've never truly seen. Until now, the sugar-coated images of the Whispering Woods and Brightmoon have hidden this true carnage from us.
I wish I were as confident as I sound.
The dramatic difference is startling. The Price of Freedom is the way She-Ra was meant to be. A show about a small band of rebels struggling to free their world from an oppressive leader and his endless army. All too often, the show's writers often forgot this premise and made the rebels and the Horde a bit too comfortable with one another. With this episode, Bob Ford creates the most meaningful She-Ra episode of all time. The series' focus on freedom reaches its height here, proving that the people of Etheria will put freedom above their homes and possessions, and, as we'll see, this is explicitly stated. Also, this scene is wonderful as we see how to mock He-Man without undermining him as so many modern writers do. Here we have He-Man arrive on the scene believing it'll be a case of he and his sister using their mighty power to drive off the Horde, but that doesn't happen, and almost immediately He-Man is made to eat his words, wishing he were as confident as he sounds. Bob Ford had a wonderful way of writing He-Man with a truthfulness. His He-Man was very self-aware. For example, when he references himself being referred to as the most powerful man in the universe in the episode Horde Prime Takes a Holiday, it's a truly wonderful moment. And throughout this episode, He-Man's bravado is undermined, but not cynically, and we see him learn how war-torn Etheria really is. And now we see Hordak and Mantenna leading the battle from within the command crawler, easily one of the biggest and most imposing Horde vehicles we've seen in the series. Hordak has a wonderful line here, one of the episode's few humorous moments.
Blast! So, Eternia's golden boy is helping the rebels again, is he? Where is he now?
In this scene we get a real sense that Hordak is a strategic leader in control of his massive army, and while his appearances are brief and limited to the command crawler, they are still dark and memorable. I feel that Mantenna being present in the episode is actually a mistake on the part of the writer. Like Orko, Mantenna has no place in the Price of Freedom. Shadow Weaver, Catra, or even Leech would have been a better choice, or no Lackey at all. As you'll see, Mantenna's humour is kept to a minimum, thankfully. Hordak's villainy is put on display over and over again in this scene, and it's one of his best, most cold-blooded moments of the series, claiming that he owns the village and he owns the people. His outburst shows how deep his evil convictions really lie.
Then burn it.
Then burn it. Amazing. Now, this scene coming up may be the most underrated scene in all of He-Man and She-Ra history.
Then what are we waiting for? We have to stop them.
No, He-Man. We stay here. These people need us.
But their homes, their possessions.
This opening exchange sets the stage beautifully. The hurried tone in He-Man's voice reveals how desperately he wants to eliminate the entire Horde's evil doing. He is the only one in the mind that does not realise just how lucky he is to have gotten this far. Coming from Eternia, He-Man is used to vanquishing Skeletor and his evil schemes, totally undoing any evil that has been committed. Such a complete victory is utterly unattainable on Etheria, where the Horde is always in control of the planet. This conversation between She-Ra and He-Man is truly breathtaking. She-Ra speaks with the voice of experience. She knows that the city of Dryl is a lost cause, and that the immediate concern is the people who escaped. She-Ra knows what is important and what is not. He-Man is unable to make that distinction. She-Ra's reply to He-Man's protests is pure genius. She deadpans. The Horde rules this planet. It is a subtle nudge at He-Man, referring to the fact that evil does not rule Eternia. She-Ra says this to emphasise that He-Man has virtually no experience in Etheria's situation. One of the fundamental themes of The Price of Freedom is that Eternia and Etheria are opposite planets. One planet is ruled by an evil power and the other is simply threatened by one. He-Man can live happily with the occasional threat from Skeletor, whereas She-Ra must endure the daily burden of the Horde. For the first time we realise that She-Ra's mission is more difficult and perhaps more admirable than He-Man's. Unlike He-Man, the odds are not in her favour. The world of Etheria is not generally a nice place to live. Evil does not simply interrupt life, it controls it. He-Man is just beginning to understand how harsh his sister's life is, and with all that said, He-Man heroically unsheathes the Sword of Power, ready to aid in the people of Dryl gaining their freedom. Firstly, I will say that Act 1 is stronger than Act 2. In fairness, Act 1 is so powerful that Act 2 would always have a hard time keeping up. This is because the table is set. She-Ra is heading back to the Great Rebellion for help, whilst He-Man and the villagers await Hordak's final assault. Until the final few minutes of the episode, the Princess of Power sadly doesn't take centre stage, but I think this is actually a wise choice, which I'll explain when we get to a specific scene. Just look at this scene, waves of Horde troopers, Hordak in the command crawler, with He-Man and the villagers contemplating their next desperate move. Actually, speaking of the villagers, at first the citizens of Dryl seem bland and almost anonymous, like so many of those peasant rebels we see in the series that have no names or personalities, but fill space just the same. They are at first a crowd of people who want freedom, just like any other group of strangers we have met on Etheria. But to our surprise, faces begin to emerge from the crowd, and even the mob begins to attain its own sense of identity and personality as this episode continues. And nowhere is this more striking than Colin, the leader of the villagers, who we see during this particular scene becomes He-Man's equal with regards to bravery. He doesn't possess the same level of strength as the most powerful man in the universe, but his heart is just as big as He-Man's. Plus he has some wonderful dialogue coming up in later scenes. He would have made for a wonderful returning guest character, especially crossing paths with He-Man again, as they do share a great deal during the second act. They also share the same voice actor, John Irwin. Now, if I was to criticise this episode, it would be for this utterly redundant action scene. I understand why this is here, because we have to see She-Ra in action, and as I've already mentioned, she doesn't take centre stage in Act 2 of this episode. Now, if Hordak had seen She-Ra fly away on Swiftwind and ordered an assault on her, it would make more sense. But these Wasp boys just seem to come out of nowhere, and as She-Ra defeats them, let me talk about She-Ra's personality in this episode. Bob Ford writes her with a quiet sadness, as if she has seen this same scenario too many times before on Etheria. We constantly get the sense that She-Ra has already been there, done that. She is always calm and in control, and her steely resolve seems to be the only thing that can get her through these battles. She has been almost sadly desensitized to this brand of war by being exposed to it so often. Now we get perhaps Hordak's best tactical moment in the series. He orders all of his troopers to cease fire, a surprising move that usually signals surrender or peace. He then declares that all lasers be fired at once, and we are immediately riveted by this prospect because there seems to be no way that He-Man could survive such an onslaught. Whereas most episodes would show He-Man persevering anyway, Bob Ford gives in to the odds and shows our hero being struck down by this monumental force of the Horde. He is blown away by the might, and this is quite possibly the Horde's greatest moment. He-Man is defeated and the mines are sealed, making Hordak the victor. When, in the history of He-Man and She-Ra, has the villain ever won? It never happens, but The Price of Freedom breaks the rules by allowing it. Bob Ford writes a plot twist that is pure genius. If the Horde truly does rule all of Etheria, then it would have to win at least a few of its battles against the rebellion, but this of course being a cartoon aimed at youngsters, the good guys are always supposed to win. Alas, Bob Ford once again proves his faithfulness to the series' original premise and awards Hordak a victory that seems realistic. No other episode so unapologetically breaks all the Filmation rules. All of those tired old guards of the series are washed away for this groundbreaking installment, and as we see, Hordak even disposes of Mantenna's comic relief. Now, I briefly mentioned a few moments ago why I thought She-Ra not taking centre stage in this episode was a good thing. You see, He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe, had already appeared in 98 episodes prior to the first episode of She-Ra airing. Thus, the audience were very familiar with him overcoming any odds, not always with great ease, but the end result was always the same. He-Man and his allies would win. By placing that same character in this situation in which he is defeated, we are not only shocked by it, but also impressed by the power of the evil horde. Had She-Ra been in the same situation, we may have subconsciously mused that this is something she has experienced before. Look at this, He-Man on his back, actually defeated. What is born out of this scene is surprising. With She-Ra away finding rebels and He-Man lying on the ground immobilised, the villagers begin to panic inside the mine, and a powerless He-Man, usually the leader in any given situation, can only watch. Now this is a terrific moment because it finally shows what Etheria might be like without the honour and power of Grayskull on their side. Without their leaders, they do not know what to do, and so they ask where She-Ra is. One woman expresses her sense of abandonment, asking, "Where is she now that we need her?" And it's easy to feel resentment towards these seemingly ungrateful villagers. The truth is that when people are given constant help, they often become dependent on others. We see this subject beautifully explored in the Season 2 episode of She-Ra, One to Count On. In The Price of Freedom, Bob Ford produces a scenario where none of the superpowered heroes are available to the average peasants, and Colin steps forward and bravely rebukes his fellow villagers, saying that he is ashamed of them. They wanted freedom, but when it gets difficult they become frightened. His speech continues, saying that freedom is valuable and never easy, and they should be grateful for the help of She-Ra and He-Man, but to never simply expect it. Fantastic writing. Meanwhile, back at the mines, things have grown progressively worse. Although the plan is in place to burrow through to the other side of the mountain, the villagers are slowly losing oxygen, and with each swing of the pickaxe they get weaker. It's actually astounding to see this deteriorated He-Man, numbed from the freeze blast, laying on his back, watching others do work. He simply looks depleted, as if the power of Grayskull no longer exists within him, and he is so helpless that he can only watch the villagers digging into the mountainside, knowing that the task for him would take mere seconds. And now She-Ra arrives back at Dryl to discover the entrance to the mine destroyed. Her desperation is evident, but it's only going to get worse and acted to perfection by Melinda Britt. I love the drama and tension of this scene as we venture back inside the mine to find it beginning to crumble. I love the joy in Colin's voice as they realise they've nearly dug through to the other side of the mountain. He-Man just about rises to his feet, and I love the interaction that he and Colin have. Colin wants to help He-Man, but He-Man sends him away, knowing that only the last remnants of his mighty strength can save them from all being crushed to death.
The roof is collapsing. We must hurry.
No, you go. I must hold it. Hurry, before it's too late. Go, now!
An amazing image here shows the villagers running past He-Man, who is holding up most of the interior of the mountain. And everyone is free, hurrah! But what we're about to get next is one of the most touching moments in the series. I'll do my best to let the voice acting of Melinda Britt and John Irwin speak for itself.
He-Man? He-Man! I'm coming to get you! Oh, please be all right.
I want to point out how awesome that pose of He-Man is, sitting cross-legged, almost peaceful, zen-like, still holding up the mountain. When he hears She-Ra's voice, it's almost like he comes out of a trance. And what does She-Ra call him?
Adam! Hello, brother.
She-Ra, I thought I was dreaming. The villagers, did they get out?
Yes, Adam. It's too perfect. Just incredible voice acting by these two incredible talents. The dialogue seems rather basic on paper, but the voice actors do such a phenomenal job of injecting the lines with richness and a love rarely expressed. He-Man and She-Ra here feel like more of a brother-sister pair than usual. It is not the words they say, but how they say them that make the emotional impact. There is such a caring and loving tone in their voices that you cannot help but feel their bond. Also, the reason I say that She-Ra uttering Adam's name is too perfect is that it's important that she identifies her brother as his true self, Adam, rather than He-Man, and that this kind of honesty is only possible in an isolated situation such as this. Of course, He-Man and She-Ra emerge from the mountain, and we are treated to a very confusing geographical issue whereby the villagers of Dryall are already in the Whispering Woods. The Whispering Woods that it took She-Ra a goodly while to get to and from. But I'm not going to delve into that issue as I want to talk about the overall impact of the episode. As of this experience on Etheria, He-Man now truly understands the struggle faced by She-Ra, her allies and the people of Etheria. He had obviously experienced the more fantastical tones of Etheria in the first 5 episodes of the series, but The Price of Freedom presents He-Man and we the audience with a brutal look at the reality of life on Etheria. So let me ask you, what constitutes the best episode of a series? It's a difficult question that we fans love to muse over. The Price of Freedom ranks right up there with the finest She-Ra installments. Horde Prime Takes a Holiday, Into the Dark Dimension, Micah of Bright Moon, Flowers for Hordak, Sweet Bee's Home. In most of those aforementioned episodes, humour or character development is what makes the story a classic. But that's it. It takes a lot to get laughs the way the revolutionary Sweet Bee's Home does, or evoke emotion like Micah of Bright Moon can, but none of these can truly measure up to The Price of Freedom. It has one thing no other episode of She-Ra possesses so unflinchingly: drama. Find me another story that tackles war, rebellion, freedom, cruelty and independence in the unafraid, unapologetic style of this episode. This is a series at its finest, a tour de force unlike anything we have seen before. The Price of Freedom easily qualifies as the greatest half hour in the history of She-Ra. This is a harrowing story of sacrifice, strife and conflict. While other episodes have packed more of a dramatic punch, He-Man's The Problem with Power and Teela's Quest come to mind, no other installment in the history of He-Man and She-Ra carries such a heavy weight. Virtually all of the most memorable episodes in the canon are great because of the character development they feature, but The Price of Freedom is great simply for its brutally powerful story. The Price of Freedom stands as a testament to what She-Ra should have been, and it proves the series' worth and its ability to have true meaning. It thoroughly explores the issues of freedom, it invites comparisons between He-Man and She-Ra in ways never before seen, and it depicts the Horde as an unstoppable evil. Few stories capture the characters in their pure essence or deal with complicated themes as well as this one. This story breaks the rules, surpasses all boundaries and stands as the most serious and striking installment of the entire series. This is a powerful, shockingly great classic. And that's the end of this episode commentary. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.